Welcome to Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on our authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Hello, Festival of Storytellers. This is JOAB Stieglitz again, author of The Old Man's Request, which is book one of the Utgarda series, which is followed by The Missing Medium and The Other Realm. I've also written a couple other books. These are all supernatural pulp adventure. And in case you forgot or you're a new viewer, here's a quick trailer of the book. All right, I'm going to share that. All right, and here we go.
50 years ago, Jason Longborough never thought that he would be part of releasing an unimaginable horror. It's just a matter of time before this ancient evil starts destroying everything in its path. Time is not on his side. Jason needs to find a way to send this malign presence back where it belongs. Unknowingly, this dangerous mission would turn the world of three people upside down. And Jason knows well that only Dr. Anna Rykov, Dr. Harold Lamb, and Father Sean O'Malley have the knowledge and strength to banish this entity. They must perform that dangerous ritual one last time before it gets too late. And some might prevent them from saving everything that they believe and protect and meet their ultimate end.
Okay, well, The Old Man's Request and the rest of my books are based on role-playing experiences that I've had, and a lot of questions came up last week about my role-playing history. So I've prepared a little PowerPoint for you so we can talk about it a little more detail. And let's see. There we are. Yes, so here are my 5 books of pulp adventure. The Old Man's Request, The Missing Medium, The Other Realm, then The Hunter in the Shadows, and The Worlds I Know. These books are all based on a game called Call of Cthulhu. However, I didn't start there. Like everybody else, I started with Dungeons and Dragons, and this is the original box set that came out in the late 70s. I was in 7th grade, and, my friends and I would fill dungeons and go defeating monsters to rescue the princess. There was always a princess to rescue. They just seemed to always get in trouble. As D&D grew in popularity, it became more complicated and had more options and things. the Forgotten Realms setting came out in the early 80s. And my first attempt at a short story was written in that universe. They had come out with the setting, but they hadn't filled in the details of all the different places. So I wrote a short story that was set in an as yet unpublished part of their world. However, when they finally did publish that piece, what they described it as was completely different from what my story envisioned. So I decided to change my story into the Warhammer fantasy role-playing world. But one of my heroes, protagonists, was an orc. And they specifically say in their writing guidelines, you cannot have hero orcs. So I decided to create my own world. You can see the map I created for it. I used Cartographer, Campaign Cartographer, for those who are curious. And I created that entire world. That's just one continent of it. And they had different cultures and different histories and all that good stuff. And as I mentioned last week, I started creating a Tolkien-esque journey tale involving journeys through this continent here called Benasia. And it didn't work out. I took too long writing it. I wrote it in spits and starts. And in the end, it wasn't worth doing. However, along the way, I discovered something new. I discovered Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu is a game based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft and the collective body of knowledge called the Cthulhu Mythos. And I bought it when it first came out in 1981. And, I thought, this is the greatest thing in the world. Got to try this. But none of my friends were interested. They were all still fixated on Dungeons and Dragons. Eventually, I got some play in college. And then finally, after college in the 90s, I ran a multi-year campaign that became the source material for The Old Man's Request. Now, along the way, my interest in Cthulhu and Lovecraft and all that stuff inspired me to collect other games because it became a very popular topic. Achtung Cthulhu is Cthulhu in World War II, as is World War Cthulhu, Europe Ablaze, which is another take on Cthulhu in World War II. Trail of Cthulhu is the same idea as Call of Cthulhu, except it's more, it covers some of the gaps in the Call of Cthulhu game. Pulp Cthulhu is a new rival, which takes the Cthulhu tales of just losing your sanity or dying and hoping you've succeeded before that happens. Pulp Cthulhu takes you into the realm that I actually write about. Action-oriented, heroic characters who may actually win. And then there's finally Fate of Cthulhu, which is where the Great Old Ones have taken over, or a particular Great Old One takes over, and you come back from the future to prevent that, which is a neat take on it. However, there are a lot of other games that have been inspired by the Cthulhu mythos. Essentially anything that has a tentacle monster in it has some linking to it. And here you can see a bunch of games, spy games. Rippers is a game where you play monster hunters rather. Deadlands is the Weird West, so monsters and things in the Wild West. East Texas University is kind of like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Day After Ragnarok is a post-apocalyptic setting. Then there's Lamentations of the Flame Princess, which is a fantasy game. Necropolis, which is a hard science fiction game. Dungeon Crawl Classics, one of my personal favorites, is a fantasy game, and Hubris is an extension of it that really dives into the Lovecraftian ilk. And then there's Call of Cthulhu, where you actually play cats. That's a very simple game to play. I've run all of these games and more over the years, and it's really been quite entertaining. All right. Went the wrong way. There we go. Next. All right. And my passion for role playing is so deep that when the pandemic hit, my regular group, we meet on Tuesday nights, we actually moved to Roll20, an online platform, to keep going. And we actually ran 2 campaigns on Roll20 before we started getting back together here at my house. Tomorrow night will be the next session. And online gaming has its advantages. Tabletop gaming has its advantages. And I enjoy both. How did you come up with these stories? All right. Well, these stories, as I mentioned, were based on games I played of Call of Cthulhu. And right here, this big binder are the notes I took for that game over here. These are the notes I took for that multi-year campaign. And some of that became The Old Man's Request. I narrowed it down from eight players to 3 protagonists in the book. I contained the plot to a single thread and wrote them out. And all 3 of the books, those being The Old Man's Request, The Missing Medium, and The Other Realm, all 3 of those books, had they been written in the last century, it seems weird saying that, but had it been written earlier, might have all been one big book instead of 3 little ones. But these days, people prefer series. And so, so I wrote those books based on the gaming. And from there, the first book was pretty much game notes. The second book, The Missing Medium, departed significantly. And then the third book, The Other Realm, is completely new material. I followed those up with The Hunter in the Shadows, which was inspired by the World War II gaming, though it does not take place during World War II. And that was followed by The Worlds I Know. And I just completed the third book of that trilogy 2 weeks ago, and it is currently being edited. And at this time, it doesn't have a title. All right. So let's see, where was I? Right. Well, time for questions. Now, I'm doing a contest, and this is just for you, Festival of Storytellers. If you click that link, https://rotfl.lol/RPG contest, I will collect entries for people who would like me to run a game for them on Roll20. It'll probably be in, after New Year's. But, we will connect and determine what kind of game you want to play, and I'll set it up. And you and 3 or 4 friends, we can have a game. And ideally, it would be a single session, but if it takes more than one, I'm game for that too. So if you're interested in playing with me running a game for you, go ahead and click on the or enter that link. Again, it's I'll drop it in the, where'd it go? There it is. I'll drop it in the chat here. Copy. That's the URL to enter the contest. And additionally, if you would like to subscribe to my infrequent newsletter, if you go to this link, joabstiglitz.com/subscribe, copy that. I'll put that one in there. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll get a link that will give you some free short stories that I've written. Those stories are actually published in another book called Tales of Gods and Monsters, but you can get them for free on the website. So does anybody else have any questions? All right, so how are we doing? We're 15 minutes, right. So, yeah, I enjoy role-playing. It keeps my mind creative. It does, however, sometimes steal from my writing time because I spend the same creative piece, the left brain creativity, writing adventures and things for my players that I use for writing my stories, my books. I do have several stories in mind, which are also inspired by games, though different games. So they have different foci and different plots. One's a murder mystery series based on hard-boiled detective in Lovecraft's Dreamlands, the modern version of Lovecraft's Dreamlands. And can you share your favorite part of the book? Of which book? The Old Man's Request? Yeah, all right. My favorite part of The Old Man's Request is probably... Can't really share it without giving away the book. But it's part of their investigation. But the story, The Old Man's Request, revolves around Anna Rykov, who is my Russian-American archaeologist in 1929 New York. And as a female professional who could be a Bolshevik, she has trouble finding a job. So when she gets offered a post by the aging trustee of a small college upstate, she accepts the post. And there she meets a doctor and a priest, and they become friends. And as you saw in the trailer, in the third, a year later, the old man is on his deathbed and asks them to address an indiscretion from his youth. And that indiscretion, cost one man his head and another his mind. Yes. So in the first book, they go about doing that, and they discover that they're uniquely qualified to do so. In fact, they were probably put in place to enable this ritual to occur. Along the way, they learn that the old man spoke to a spiritualist before he died. And when they go to New York City to consult with the spiritualist, they find that the medium is missing. Instead, they find gangsters, monsters, and cultists. And this guy here, who has a parchment which has images of the three of them, or two of the three, on an expedition with him, where he claims is in another dimension. As you can see, there are monsters in the background coming after him. When they ultimately learn where the medium is, Anna must travel into the realm of the medium's own imagination to rescue both him and herself in the third book, The Other Realm. And that is the first trilogy, and they're a pretty good read. All three of them are available as paperbacks, ebooks, and on Audible. And the Audible recordings sound amazing. I mean, when I heard them, I couldn't believe that it wasn't a book that I had bought by someone else, because it sounded amazing. Now, my books are all available on Amazon and other online retailers. They're available at JOAB.STIEGLITZbooks.com, which you can see in the trailer, the crawler on the bottom there. And I also have my own website, JOAB.STIEGLITZ.com, which you can see in the chat. And that site has information about appearances and speaking, being a speaker somewhere. Let's see. You're very creative from the cover to the title. Thank you very much. Is it possible that you'll also be making a book about evil possession? No, that's not really my, well, yes and no. In The Hunter in the Shadows, there is a race of aliens that swaps bodies with people. They exist across all dimensions. No, they exist across all time, and they swap bodies with people to learn about that individual's world, and they send that person back to their own world, where usually the unwilling timeshare or brain share participant can't handle it and goes insane. But they are featured in several of the books. Your book, the story of your book is quite the same as the movie Insidious. I've never seen the movie Insidious, so if it is, that's purely coincidental. But maybe I'll take a look at that one. My books, as I mentioned, are based on pulp adventure and cosmic horror. Cosmic horror differs from traditional horror, which is gothic horror. In gothic horror, that's where you deal with man's transgressions against God and unhappy spirits and ghosts and possession by demons and things like that. Vampires, all those things. Those are all related to man defying God in some way. Frankenstein creates life. Dracula casts off God and becomes a demon. Things like that. So, but in cosmic horror, which is what I write, mankind is insignificant in the universe. And there are other beings out there who don't even notice humanity or have no interest in humanity, but their affairs occasionally impact life on Earth. Sometimes in big ways, like the extinction of the dinosaurs, and sometimes in little ways by manipulating individuals to cause historical events. Now, if you're familiar with dimension theory, every change in theory creates a dimension where both alternatives are carried out. And that is in the background of my books, where I have one race, as I mentioned, one alien species, I should say, that lives across all time, and another one that lives across all dimensions simultaneously. And they are at odds with each other. Is your favorite author of the same genre as your book? Yeah. The authors I generally think of as my favorites are, the first one is Brian Lumley. Brian Lumley is known for his Necroscope series, which is vampire stories, and there's a bunch of them. But before he wrote those, he wrote cosmic horror stories, and specifically cosmic horror stories where the protagonists, I should say, have a chance. In traditional Lovecraftian stories, the protagonist usually goes insane or dies, or usually they go insane. But the result of encountering the cosmic horror is not something a mere human can handle. Brian Lumley took his stories in a more adventurous direction. His protagonists, and he has several. Titus Crow is a time-traveling investigator. Not time-traveling like Doctor Who. He has a device called the Clock of Dreams, where he can move around throughout time. There are several stories of his. And they were a foundation in my writing style. I actually met him in 1999 at Necronomicon, which is the Lovecraft convention in Providence, Rhode Island. And he inspired me. He said, write whenever you can. It doesn't matter if it's a thought or a sentence or a paragraph. Just write it down, and those things will germinate and become something. Lumley also wrote some, again, this is before the vampire stuff. He also wrote some heroic adventures set in Lovecraft's Dreamlands. This is the Hero of Dreams series. Another thing that I like to read. Are you also open in writing a different genre of books? I'm just about to get there. The other thing I like to read are mysteries, particularly historical mysteries. And one of my favorite authors for that is Philip Kerr, who has a detective called Bernie Gunther, who lives in Germany in the 20s and 30s. And he is a police detective. In the 20s, he is a police detective for the democratic government of the Weimar Republic. However, when the Nazis take over and absorb the police into the SS, he becomes a de facto Nazi and must deal with his superiors as well as do his job of solving crimes. And those are wonderful books. They also juxtapose his pre- and wartime investigations with his post-war hiding as a Nazi war criminal, even though he wasn't a volunteer. He was, in fact, not an SS officer as a police inspector, and he was therefore a war criminal, and people were looking for him. And he escaped through to South America and has other adventures, investigative adventures, juxtaposed with flashbacks to his historical adventures. I've also, of course, read Conan Doyle. I've read all of the James Bond books by Ian Fleming. I like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I've got all of those books as well as the entire series on DVD. So I'm currently, as I mentioned a little while ago, I'm currently working on a detective story set in Lovecraft's Dreamlands, kind of combining the Bernie Gunther stories and the Hero of Dreams tales. But I'm going to put that into a 1930s era or 1950s era, or even a modern era Lovecraft's Dreamlands, with cars and cities and industry and all that stuff, as well as monsters and elder gods and stuff like that. So that is what I am currently planning to do next. I'm also considering, I'm doing research right now for a publisher who is putting out what's called New Pulp, which is new stories written about his pulp characters from the magazines of the late 19th, early 20th century. And particularly there's one called Horatio Humberton, who is a mortician by day, but very wise and learned, and is trusted by the police to investigate or to assist with their investigations, which for Humberton frequently involve supernatural things. So I'm thinking about submitting a proposal to write some books about him. So that's where I am looking next. Let's see. So we're almost out of time. So I will say one more time, my name is JOAB Stieglitz. My website is joabstiglitzbooks.com, which you see scrolling on the bottom there. And if you go to my website, you can, actually, let's go back there. Share. We can switch back to the PowerPoint here. Yes, if you go to my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter, and that'll give you access to 3 short stories, which are not related. They're actually different genres, as you were asking. They're not related to the books. They're completely separate stories. And also, if you are a gamer and you wish to, and you'd like me to run a game for you and your friends, you can go to the website there, which is rotf.lol/RPG contest, and enter to win a game. And the winner's going to be selected on November 27th. That's the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And I will publish it on my website as well as social media. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram if you want to catch me there. So we're out of time. So thank you, everybody. And I'll be back online again at, I forget what time, 3:30, I believe, this afternoon. And tonight at 7 o'clock, I'll be doing a reading. I haven't selected what passage yet, but I'll be doing a reading tonight from 7 to 8 right here at my booth. So I'll see you then.